Hey everyone, Mama Jones here, and I'm going to wait just a moment and see if we have some folks to join us today. Drop some information here. All right, and we're going to get started right at 1 p.m. Eastern. I hope y'all are enjoying this summer weather. I'm down here in Florida and I cannot complain. It's definitely hotter than my usual perch, which is in Alabama, but I really love this front porch living down here. All right. Okay, we're gonna get this set up here. See if we got any folk. All right. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here right now. Hopefully some other folk will come on and have this conversation with us. But welcome to Purpose Behind the Plate podcast. This podcast is not just about me coming on here and talking to you. I'd love to interview you and have you join me here on the podcast. We're going live every week and we're talking about different topics. Today, you're going to hear a topic that we actually discussed in our CNP CEO leadership class last night. So if you were there, guys, you're going to hear something similar about what we talked about last night. But that's just kind of by happenstance that we're talking about something that I think is pretty important. And, you know, one thing about the We Are CNP community is this is where we come and we discuss our concerns and our challenges in our food programs. And we do a lot of talk about leadership. You know, that is kind of like the basis of where we start with all our conversations and really leading our teams into a place of compliance, because that's my major goal for CNP programs. We can have the best food. We can have cool teams, or, you know, we can do fun activities. We can, you know, we can have fruits and vegetables galore. But if we're not in compliance, we do not have a food program. So we got to stay in compliance. But today I want to pull up here my title so I can see it myself. Here's our title today: Stop Babysitting and Start Building a Team that knows how to lead themselves, a team that knows how to train themselves. So let's get into it. As child nutrition professionals, I am inviting you to this podcast every week so that we can all come together to lead with purpose and not just survive in our programs. So again, I'm your host. If we haven't met in person or you haven't had a chance to have a one-on-one with me, and this is about getting real about something that I actually had to learn the hard way. So if you're doing everything yourself in your organization, you're oftentimes not actually leading, you're being a babysitter. And that's kind of funny because some people who are in the CNP community operate child cares, and many of us operate in schools as well. So to hear that we're babysitting our own employees might sound strange, but I want us to look at stopping that today. So I have 3 ways we're going to stop babysitting and actually start leading our teams. So I'm going to take you back to a time where I actually lived here. All right. I lived in a place where I was kind of doing all the work myself. And so some barriers and some mindset problems I was having was, number one, I thought I was the only person who could get it right. I'm like, okay, I'm the person who has the training. I'm the person responsible. I'll give you a little bit of the task, but ultimately I'm the only person who can get it right. And so I thought that was, you know, me being a good leader. I thought it was me being responsible, but as we're going to talk about, that actually could lead to bottlenecks in your program. So I'll talk about a time where it was time for an audit. And we actually had an audit that was scheduled. So that was good, right? We knew when the auditors were going to show up. We knew what they would be looking for. So what I did is I took everybody's records. And at that time, I was working at a school site and I had 12 school sites. I took everybody's records home on the weekend and I redid them all. And I'm talking about menus, production records, making sure it all matched the receipts. And yeah, that sound, first of all, that was wild. It was wild. I was stressed. I was home with I had a young family at that time. And so I had like two babies crawling around, and I had a full-time life happening. And I did that over a weekend in preparation for the audit. And like I said, I thought I was doing something noble. I thought I was getting ahead of the game. But as I look back at it, and what I really found out was that was a mistake. That was a mistake, because it showed a couple of things. Number one, it showed that if I did have to redo those production records, that means they were not done correctly the first time. That means that I had people on my team who were not accomplishing the goal from day to day. And we're not talking about like 1 day of production records. If you've ever been through an audit, it could be from 5 days up to 30 days. So we're talking about lots and lots of paperwork. And so it's one thing like to pre-check something, but to redo a whole school system's worth of materials means that I didn't lead properly. And I certainly didn't check my people. Why would I even have to sit there and do that? So that was me babysitting. That wasn't me leading. The records weren't completed properly, just for your information. They were missing many things. Some things weren't even completed at all. Some things were basic stuff, and I found that out. And had I not done that, I would have failed that audit. So it's great that I caught that before, but it's bad that my team wasn't ready. And I can't blame that on my team. I cannot blame that on my team. I have to blame that on my own systems that I had in place, because what you expect, you should be inspecting in one way or another. And it doesn't mean that every day you're looking at these materials, but you should have some type of system to go and make sure that what people say that they're doing is actually happening. All right. And in a way, that might sound like it's babysitting too, but it is much better to actually put a system in place of checks and balances, right? So there's a task, there needs to be a review of that task. There needs to be some kind of balance there that ensures that that task is actually getting completed. So a couple other things about this scenario is that I didn't trust them. And with good reason, but I didn't trust them. I didn't trust my team. And it wasn't like, this isn't a personality issue. It's not like, oh, I didn't trust my team because they were always doing me wrong. I really didn't trust them because I knew I hadn't put in that upfront work. I never trained them to the standard. And by training, we're not just saying, oh, tell somebody how to do something. No, there's a process of training. The same training that I felt like I had to be able to correct that documentation and to make it come into compliance, same type of training is what I should have been providing for my team. So I never trained them. I didn't trust them. So that is the trap that we fall into. And that's called the babysitting trap. What happens there is we keep fixing things, we keep having to clean up things, and we keep ultimately carrying the whole load. And we think we're being responsible. And I wish I could say that I learned immediately that lesson, but I didn't. I continued to do things like that until things ultimately fell apart. And by fall apart, this is something that you may have experienced before. It might be something like overwhelm or stress or burnout. Those are all the things that can happen to you as the leader when you are missing systems in your place. Okay. So what we want to do is ultimately build programs that can run without us. That is the CEO mindset. We need to build programs that can ultimately run when we're not there. What happens on a day that you want to take a vacation? And I'm sorry, y'all, I'm actually on vacation. right now. And so you might hear there's like a truck across the street that's running. It just came from nowhere. My nephew just went by and I'm like, please don't walk in front of the video. But listen, let me tell you something. My business is still operating. Is yours? And that's what you want to be able to say. You want to be able to go on things like a vacation and be ensured that you're going to come back to a program that, number one, has stayed in compliance, has stayed in business, and that your team is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So leadership ultimately isn't about us doing more and taking on more. It's about building up teams of people who can do it with us. So let's really look at what self-leading teams look like. And so I'm going to give you just a couple of things about what a self-leading team looks like. A team that leads itself does not mean that you disappear. You don't disappear. Your job doesn't disappear. Some people feel like if they turn over tasks to other people that they won't have anything to do. Trust me, you will still have things to do. And one of the greatest things that arise from you turning over tasks to other people is you having clarity about your organization altogether, because it gives you time and energy to focus on the projects that really matter, those projects that really require you to touch. You know, you as the leader, you as the manager, you as the director, there are some things in your organization only you can touch. But something like what I just mentioned, like production records, that's not one of them. Someone on your team should be doing that. So when you turn tasks over, it doesn't mean that you disappear. It just means that you've put in systems and expectations and growth pathways. A growth pathway, just to kind of segue there, is the plan for an employee. When an employee comes into your organization, they should have stepping stones of how they're going to grow. And they may want to grow into your position one day, but there are multiple steps that they have to get there, and that's called a growth pathway. So let me give you some examples of this in action. This is when your cook knows how to portion and plate correctly because you've trained and empowered them. That means that cook knows that your student who is age 6 to 12 years old is going to get 1 cup serving of milk. All right. They have portioned that correctly. They understand the why behind it. And the why isn't because the why is because we have to, but the why is because that's what the standards say. And we know all the kids don't love milk. That's not their favorite beverage to drink, but the standards said to serve milk and to serve it at 1 cup, not half a cup, not 1/8 a cup, not 1/4 of a cup. This 6-year-old, this school ager gets 1 cup of milk, and your cook knows how to do that. And you didn't have to go and remind them every day because you put a system in place to empower them and educate them. So that's an example of that. This is when you leave an assistant manager or a shift manager in charge, and they don't call you every time there is an emergency with a student who has an allergy. Now, that's a big one, right? That's a big one. That's scary. And you're like, oh, my God, I don't know if I can leave that in the hands of someone else. Yeah, you can. If you went ahead and built a system around it, if you built that safety net around it, if you have a system in place that, number one, identifies the student, identifies the allergen, gives that employee the tools to then manage that situation. Do you have a checklist that shows that, okay, Johnny has a peanut allergy. These are the foods that Johnny cannot eat. If Johnny gets a hold of a peanut, these are the steps for you to take. Y'all, that's just steps. Do they need to notify you if Johnny has an allergic reaction? That could be in the steps, but do you need to show up and manage that whole situation? No, because Johnny's going to be with you a whole entire school year. You need to train your team to take care of situations like that. All right. Here's another one. This might be, maybe you have a person who helps you with the paperwork daily. Okay. And can they complete those reports without you having to remind them at every step that this report needs to be run on Monday? This report needs to be completed daily. This report needs to be filed here. This report needs to be put into the computer. If you got to remind them at each task or you have to do it yourself, that means there's no system in place. What would it take for you to take that report, identify it, write down those, I call them the big 5. Can you complete this task in 5 steps? You know, get you a big 5 and just write that down. I don't even care if you type it out. I want you to write that down and work side by side with one of your employees so that they can begin to complete that documentation for you. And design a checklist for yourself or a checklist for them to make sure that it's accurate every time. See, this is what we learn here in the CNP CEO Academy for those who are there. We understand that teams that perform under audit pressure do better, all right? And we want this pressure every day. This is called good pressure, all right? This is called preparation, honestly. So that when you are out of your organization for a day, for vacation, a doctor's appointment, that things are still getting done. You shouldn't return back to your organization to a stack of paperwork. You know, I've been gone from my organization for about a week now. There better not be no paperwork sitting around nowhere. You know what I'm saying? Things should be getting done. What I should be coming back to is what my responsibility for that task is, which is the follow-up. Okay. And so finally, what I want to talk about here is how we begin to shift our culture, because we've been doing it this way for so long. I'm telling you, I did it for years, y'all. I did it for years. I'm not blaming you. This is how we learn. A lot of us just got thrown into our positions. We never had training ourselves. We never had anyone to sit side by side with us. And so to now think about doing that for our teams, it may feel a little strange. Okay, it may feel strange, but when you begin to make this a culture, and a culture is really just a set of expectations, a set of values that you operate from. When you build that into your organization, that's how you begin to shift everybody into this place of, as a team, them feeling empowered, and you as a leader getting to a higher place of clarity and being able to see the full vision of your organization. So here's what we're going to do. Number 1, we are going to stop doing what our team can do themselves, even if they fail at first. And that's going to be a hard one, because you're going to put a task into someone's hand and they're not going to give that 100% that you need. All right. Or they're going to give 100%. I like to say this about myself, because sometimes I'll give 100% in the totally wrong direction, but I gave 100%. But that is what we call a fumble. They'll fumble it at first. But the purpose of a fumble, when you are looking at this idea of letting your team do it themselves, is so that they can learn. All right. It's how many of us learned, you know, it's how many of us became great at what we do, is that we had some mistakes along the way, and that's fine. But your role in that exchange is to then coach them into the right product, you know, the right outcome. What does success look like when this task is completed correctly? That's your role. So let's go ahead and make sure that we are not doing the things that our team can do. Step 2, document your training. The longer you work with me, the longer you're going to know. We're always going to be talking about written documentation. Written documentation is always going to trump verbal instructions. Now, when you put them together, you got a power team. And then you ice that cake when you really throw in things like visual aids. That's like templates, pictures, all those good things that teach people how to do it from a different method other than verbal and written instructions. But you have to document this training. And this is how you know if something you're doing needs a training, written documentation, checklist, or template. This is how you know. If you have to do it more than once, then it needs written documentation. All right. And ice that cake with those verbal instructions and those job aids, those templates, those SOPs, those pictures. Okay. Man, can you think of one task that you could give away today if you wrote down the instructions, if you trained a capable team member to do it, if you made pictures of what you wanted it to look like, and if you followed up? How much time of your day could you save? I don't know, something to think about. And then finally, give ownership, not just tasks. If I was turning over the production records to a new person in my organization, I'd say, you are the production record princess. I said, and if it's a guy, I have to come up with something else. But I would give them ownership. Be like, this is your task. You're the person responsible for it now. You're the person I'm entrusting. I believe that this is something that you can do and you can accomplish to these set of standards. If you need help, call me. Say to them, make sure that this production record is completed in a timely fashion and meets the compliance guidelines that I'm giving you here, and train them to that. So finally, let's check on our own mindset. You are not a one-person miracle worker, even though you are building a wonderful, amazing, and excellent program. You don't have to do it on your own. You're actually an architect of systems and developer of people. And that is the CEO mindset. So this week, I want you to think about one powerful question. If I couldn't show up tomorrow, what would keep running and what would fall apart? I want you to start building the system that closes that gap. And for those of you who are in the CNP CEO Academy, if you want more information on what we talked about today, go back to your week 2 materials and handouts. All right, y'all. Hope to see you next week. And those of you who would love to have a conversation here on the podcast and share it with the We Are CNP community, please contact me. I'd love to have a conversation with you. All right. Talk to you soon.